Hello! Much excitement today because there's a very interesting product up to test. I have it up the right way, and it's called the Recon Nano. And it is a tiny little quad which should fly for about 15 minutes on an 18650 battery, which sounds crazy. Before we get started, I've got to thank my friend and Patreon Gaff who sent this over to me. He runs an FPV store in the UK called Your FPV, and if you're UK focused, check it out because of course you'll get delivery quickly if you're in the UK. There'll be a link to his shop down below of course, but in the meantime, thanks very much Gaff. He pretty much just wanted my take on this, good or bad, which is very lovely of him. So yeah, let's have a look. At first I was a little bit sceptical about the idea because I thought, why are they using 18650? Just because they can, or as opposed to being good? But having opened up the box and looked at it, I am absolutely intrigued. This is what you get in the box. We have in here the tiniest, lightest little thing you can think of, when literally just a place to shove a battery there. This is so lightweight, it absolutely feels ridiculous. Without the battery you're looking at 62.5 grams. This is the Crossfire version. I think you can put other receivers in there and stuff. And most of the things about it look very much sort of whoop focused. But with a Crossfire and the VTX this has got, this is potentially a long range quad, bizarrely. We've got these tiny 1202.5, don't know about 0.5 thing, 11,600 kV motors, and they will run these Gemfan Hurricane 3018-2, so two bladed prop, 3 inches, because two bladed are more efficient essentially. The guts of it is from HGLRC. We've got a couple of bits here. We've got the HGLC Zeus all-in-one, and we're using a VTX called the Zeus Nano, which is a particularly weird little shape which will fit into this quite well. That goes up to 350 milliwatts, so already we're looking at, you know, this could go a decent range. Other couple of things you get in the box, some spare screws, a little card saying please put the battery in the right way round. There's even a little TPU printed bit here which shows you that is the positive, that's the negative. Don't screw that up. A QC badge, something about flying safe, and some stickers. Gaff was also kind enough to send over an 18650. This is a 2600 mAh with 25 amps. Usually in 18650 the amp rating is usually quite low because of course they're not really used for this sort of thing. They're mostly using like vape pens. I guess you don't need an awful lot of current. Now I did have these as well. I got these spare for one of my transmitters. I don't believe the specs on this one because this is apparently 9,900 milliamp hours and it's listed as having a high discharge current, which that's a little bit subjective, isn't it? It's also got an Nano camera, which is a really good micro camera, and it even says that the flight controller has its own sort of Wi-Fi connector, so you should be able to use a SpeedyBee app on your phone to do it directly without any extra special stuff. So it's pretty high quality components all over. The question is, how's it going to fly? Will we get 15 minutes fly out of one of these? That would sound absolutely crazy, wouldn't it? Now I'm a little bit unfamiliar with 18650s in terms of flying them, and I looked at the Recon FPV website and it had a couple of things saying we recommend stopping flying at 2.8 to 3.2 volts. Other places suggest that the safe voltage on this is down to 3.1. Obviously under load it might drop under, but if it's anywhere like 3 I think you really want to get down quickly. It had some slightly scary stuff on the website. It says, when the power of the battery cannot fulfill the working requirements of the ESC or VTX, it may stop working. Long periods of full throttle flight should be avoided. Try to lower your throttle if your VTX blacks out. Wouldn't that be interesting? Normally when we lose video signal, the first instinct is to punch the throttle to go up because we think we've lost it there. It seems like we're really on the edge about how close this is to not powering that VTX. Presumably it all runs on 5 volts through some voltage regulation on the VTX, but we will find out. But first thing to do is take a look at the Betaflight config, see what we're looking at, pop the props on, and because it's so small I can take it out for a hover first in the garden just to see what sort of flight time I get out of it before we venture further out and see what's happening. Okay, so I've just plugged this in with a cable, I should state, to Betaflight just to see what's going to go on. So let's collect in and see what we've got. Now the USB connector's at the bottom, which is why it's at a funny angle because it sort of stood up on itself, but that's okay. Seems to be alright. Port wise, this is interesting. So we've got configuration MSP via USB as you might expect. We've also got it on UART1, so I guess UART1 is taking up a UART for that connection, so you can use the SpeedyBee app. So we've got UART2 on Serial RX, that's going to be for Crossfire, hence we've got a soft serial set up for IRC Tramp VTX this is using. Okay, so configuration wise, now there's nothing I want to sort of change in here in terms of anything else, but I do note that it's got reverse props, so that's one thing to look at. It's running D-Shot 600 at an 8K 4K loop. I'll be adding motor stop because I don't want this just going by itself. Doing some personalization changes. Of course, it's got soft serial, air mode OSD dynamic filter. I don't like air mode on all the time, so I'll be taking that bit off. It hasn't got any D-Shot beeper configuration, which we might have to add. Obviously, there's no physical beeper on this. It's very small. This could get lost very easy, so that's one thing to bear in mind. Power and battery, what we got? Oh, it looks like some work done here. So they've set the minimum cell voltage and the warning cell voltage to 3 volts. I think we probably need the warning around sort of 3.2 with the minimum as 3, something like that, but nothing too bad. PID tuning wise, this is interesting. Only from the fact that I don't intend to change anything. Now on the rates, this is the normal. It's got the 0.7 on the Super 8s. I don't see this as any sort of acrobatic machine. I don't think you can. This is something you can really flick the throttle at. Normally I would be running 0.8 with a max velocity of 1,000 degrees each way. I think I might leave this as is for now. My impression of this sort of craft is this is something you want to fly in a certain way to get the most out of it, basically. And that doesn't involve hitting the throttle all the time. Receiver wise, I haven't bound this yet. I'll sort that in a second. I'll need to. Oh no, this is 4.2. I think in 4.2 Crossfire comes over by itself and you don't need to think about it. I'll check that. Mode setup, they've just got arm and angle at the moment. I'll add some more bits to that, obviously. Motor's not much to think about. And we've got some stuff on the OSD. It's interesting that they've decided to add battery voltage here along with average cell voltage when we're dealing with a single cell battery. It seems a little bit overkill, but most of the stuff's there. It just needs moving around a bit to suit me. And video transmitter is set up, so we've got the 2500, 200, 350. That's good. Yeah, and that's it. So yeah, just to clarify as well, so the target here is the HLRC F411 and it's running Betaflight 420 at the moment. Okay, I will make those changes and then we'll put it together and I shall take it out for a quick hover and see how it feels. Well, I've got it here just before we go and fly to show the connection via the Wi-Fi link. But before I do that, I'm just a little bit concerned because I thought that is so tight. If I put that in, then I was a bit worried about getting it out. So what I've done for me is I just made this loop from piece. This is a piece of like ribbon for putting in parcels, and using that I was much more confident that I could press that down all the way, and I can't get a good grip on it, but using that I can just give it a good old pull like that and it's all good. Anyway, if we plug this in quickly. So the first time you do this you'll need to join this manually, but if you go into the SpeedyBee app and you have connected before, then it should say the last device you connected to was that network. Do you want to connect to it? And we say yes. And it joins in, and you can see there on the screen we've got a little thing there, and we can go and we can do loads of changes. You can do your PID tunings, you can do all your bits. It does seem a little bit pointless to me because it's something that I would do in Betaflight and do once, and most of the time I wouldn't need to go into it again. I mean, you can change up your OSD, which is quite useful, but there's not an awful lot I will do there. That's the only thing, but it's good to have, obviously. So cut now to in my garden, and I wanted to show you what the sound sounds like, because this will actually record sound via the VTX, and it's pretty bad, but you've got something if you want to. So what I'm doing here in the garden, I've literally just got it in angle mode, and I'm just flying a line of sight, because what I wanted to do was just to check what it was like using a Li-ion battery, because it's something I haven't really done before, just to understand what would the battery dip to initially and how it would drain down, and also just to find out exactly how much time I would get to fly on it. You will notice on this one I'm being fairly gentle on the throttle. It's around about the 40-ish% mark, and that's keeping it in the air, and that's pretty much the maximum we're going to get from this battery. And obviously I'm speeding this up because you don't want to look at this for real time. We got about 12 and a half minutes, not 15, but quite reasonable, and this is a 2600 milliamp hour battery, and the recommendation is a 3000 milliamp hour battery. But it at least gave me some confidence about how long the battery would last, and don't panic when you're sort of hitting 3.3 because you've still got a good few minutes left. Now, I did also try one of those best fire batteries I had, and results were not good. Yeah, I was a bit worried that this battery was crap, and I wasn't wrong. It immediately dipped below 2.8 volts and just would not take off. So decent C rating is required on these batteries. So this is the one Gaff sent me. It's called the P26A, 2600 milliamp hours and 25 amps. Seems to be made by Molicel and was supplied by www.18650.co.uk. It seemed like a pretty good battery, which is when I wanted to show it. And because my battery was so bad, I went out and bought the one that's recommended, which is called the Sony VT6, which is a 3000 milliamp hour, only 15 amps, again sold by 18650. First I was like, is this an original? And it's a Sony Maruta battery, so if you've got that Maruta text there, you seem to be okay. Anyway, let's go and test both these properly now. Hello, welcome to the stealth mission. If you're wondering where I am, you may recognise this as being where I used to fly, but now builders have taken over, and hence there's a big fence up here. But I am not trespassing. I am on the public side of the fence. That is the bad side of the fence. Obviously, I haven't been here because most of the time building's going on. It's Sunday today and I can get to here. The main reason I'm here though is you've probably seen that lovely site I flew last time with the big field. If you know where that is on the south coast, and many of you guys recognised it, you will also know that there is a single road in and out. And on a nice day where the weather's good today, it's a Sunday, it's also a bank holiday weekend, unless you really enjoy sitting in your car getting frustrated because you're not moving anywhere, that's a case of not going. But it was such a nice day, I thought I'd have to come out and try it. Also, because this thing is so small, it's got range, it's got flight time, it feels like a sort of secret agent stealth quad. Hence we are here doing a stealth mission. Now there is a couple of problems. Firstly, I'm right in front of a metal fence. Now that can't be good, but it's the best I've got at the moment, so I thought let's give it a try, see what happens. Try not to crash on that side of the fence, else there'd be problems. But if all goes okay, let's fly it around and see what we get. Let's go, but be sneaky about it and quiet. Shh. And if nothing else, you've got to say this little quad is certainly quiet. At more than sort of 10 feet away, you really can't hear much at all. There's a very thin sort of buzzing noise from a distance. All I'm trying to do here is sort of figure out how it feels, what sort of inputs I'm having to give into flying it. And I'm very conscious of the fact that what you can't do with this sort of thing is zap the throttle to do any sort of big maneuvers. You can't simply blip the throttle to get out of trouble. If you're used to flying a sort of 5-inch race style quad on something like a 4 or 6S cell battery, you can just dive out the sky and within a couple of inches you can just blip the throttle and you're zooming away again. On this you have to really think about things in front. Firstly, it really doesn't like any big throttle maneuvers. Secondly, if you do hit the throttle hard, there's a sort of a lag for the power to sort of build up. I'm just trying to figure out here, having turned around, like, where am I? Can I find myself? And fortunately I can. There I am. Hooray. I can continue flying. So yeah, I'm also really conscious of the fact that I want to keep my throttle to an absolute minimum. Yes, this thing will get long flight times, but if you are just very casual with it, you won't get as much. If you fly it like you try and fly a regular quad, don't expect any big flight times. If you fly it gently and carefully, that's when you can expect those sort of flight times. So this is going to kind of divide people. I kind of like it as like, this is a very different way of flying, because it's taking a different set of me concentrating in a very different way to how I normally fly to try and get the absolute optimum I can from it. If that doesn't appeal to you, then this quad won't either, to be perfectly frank. But I like it. As I said before, this is secret agent stuff. We're on a stealth mission. We're flying in a very interesting sort of way, and in a quad that's very different. And it's all a bit of a different mindset, I think. Yeah, here's my field. I figure, you build over my field, I fly over your building site. Fair's fair. Fortunately, the good thing about this being a Sunday, of course, is they're not there. So I can do this relatively safely. I really did not want to crash here though, because aside from the fact I'd have to go over a fence with my dodgy knee, it's also a hell of a walk. We got up to around 500 metres eventually, but I really couldn't resist. I thought, look, there's a crane there, I'm on a tiny quad, let's go through the crane gap. This is a really good way of getting your heart pumping, because mine certainly was. Not just because it was some distance away, it's because it flies in a different way. You can't rely on just being able to drop down and hit that throttle. You see me sort of coming in quite low and dropping gently, as opposed to just trying to zap it up. So it's all a bit different. Now, I won't take you through the entire flight because it is a bit long, but I explored a little bit. I was keeping an eye on my LQ there. I was trying to figure out, is this battery going to last? What do I need to get back? I was a little bit concerned that, I was just going to drop at some point and have a problem. You will notice as well, I've put the power up to the max 350 milliwatts. Normally I'd start at 25 milliwatts, but when I've got this field to sort of sneak in and do a fly, I thought I'll zap it up to maximum just to make sure I'm fine, and then I know what's what. I also felt I'm not going to get the same amount of flight time doing this sort of regular flying than I am just hovering in the garden, so I was quite careful to make sure I was back within plenty of time, still able to fly around close to myself and eke that last bit of battery out. And so by the time it started dipping into the 3.2 and falling just below, I decided to get close to myself and on the right side of the fence, because I didn't want it to just suddenly run out of power. I feel it's really useful just to do some batteries to find out how it's going to perform time after time, because I've got some bits from hovering in the garden, but when you're out using a bit more throttle, using a bit more forward speed, it's a little bit different. Should mention that the camera's getting a nice image. The VTX is doing pretty well. It's all a bit shaky, and that's because it's very susceptible to the winds. It's so light, even with that battery, that it has more of a problem cutting through a wind than a regular quad. So if it's a little bit breezy, this thing's gonna wobble about a bit, and if it's if there's a decent amount of wind up, you're gonna have to really lean it and expect to go really slow going into wind than you are going downwind. But even with a regular sort of flying around, we still got a decent 10 minutes out of this battery. I think I could have gone a little bit longer, but I decided after it just started dipping in under the 3.1 that it's probably time to come back. So we've hit 10 minutes. I'm going to come down and land it. There's actually quite a reasonable tilt on the camera from the default settings, too much so to land gracefully on my mat, but it's so light and the grass is so long that all you have to do is sort of get vaguely close to yourself and just cut the power and you'll be fine. As I also had the Sony battery, I wanted to go and fly some with that to see how it fared, see if it was better than the original one I had. So this is a site that I've flown at occasionally, basically under a bunch of power lines, which is not the best place to fly, let's face it. The reason I was here is because I was checking Google Maps, as I sometimes do, trying to find if there are any other fields around me that would easily be accessible. And I could see there was one that was kind of joined to the end of this, at the end of all these pylons going the other direction. Basically it finishes in a train line which you can't cross, but on the left of that seemed to be a field, and I thought, can I find the field? Unfortunately, when I went down that way, there were a lot of trees. Now from this angle it looks a little bit like bushes, but these are all above head height and these are very, very dense and thick. But you can just see there on the left, just over those trees, there is indeed a field there Whether I can get to it in some way, I don't know, but I will have a look at some other routes. I had a quick look through the woods. That's very dense as well, so I just couldn't get to that bit at all, unfortunately. But maybe a plan to do some recce work there and figure out how to get to it. So there wasn't an enormous difference in the time I could fly this for. At 10:30 I'm starting to get towards the 3.1, so I thought I'd bring it in. Now, something to mention, you can see I'm about 15 feet, 12 feet away from myself, straight in front of myself, and the beeper in this thing, which I set up for the D-Shot beeper, is so quiet. I was looking around for it, I couldn't find it. I had the beeper going, I could not hear it. I had to be within about 3 feet to hear this, so be really, really careful. Make sure you know where you land this thing, because even knowing where I landed it and having the beeper, it still took me almost 2 minutes to find something which was like 12 feet in front of me on my landing. So I waited till after the bank holiday, and then I went up to my normal site because I wanted to see how it would fare in two things. One of which being on 25 milliwatts, the second hitting the throttle hard. So that's 100% throttle hit, and nothing bad seemed to happen. I mean, what it said is don't prolong big throttle movement. So if you sort of stayed at 100%, perhaps that would be bad. But doing the odd big punch is not going to murder it. But you saw it's not a big climb either. So 25 milliwatts is actually pretty good. If you remember, the little linear VTX antenna is out absolutely in a straight line from the back of the quad. So you're not working with much that's very good. But what we're getting here is a fairly good reception. We're out to a good few hundred meters here. And I just wanted to sort of try turning it to see if we got any breakup, because of course we'd be blocking the antenna. Looks pretty good. So I was going to carry on a little bit further. I'm not pushing it out too far. I was just sort of going to where it starts getting a little bit speckly and saying this is what it is. But at this distance, for 25 milliwatts on a tiny quad like this, it's doing really well. You can do a decent distance on the most minimal of power, and it fares okay. This is back on the original P26 2600 milliamp hour battery. You see, it's just starting to get a little bit noisy there, so I decided that was it. But you can see I'm a good distance away, and that is a pretty damn good picture at 25 milliwatts for something like this. And just to show that you can, I went up and I did some sort of light rolls and flips. You can do them. It's not really the quad to choose for doing this, but it's still a quad. It's still running Betaflight. The rates are still reasonable to do this sort of thing, so you can absolutely do this if you want to. I actually ended up bringing this quad in early because there was a man with a camera who was very into photography who was asking questions about this. So I thought I'd bring it in, I'll show him what it was, because he was used to the DJI stuff, so I wanted to explain it. And he was fascinated by the fact it was running off an 18650 battery. As the power in the battery got lower, I tried another quick punch just to see if I could do something bad like knock the VTX out, but it seemed okay, so you'd really have to put it at high throttle for quite a long time to cause a problem, I think. There's probably a little bit more in the tank, but I brought this down again at 10 minutes, so we seem to be getting a reasonably comfortable 10 minutes even with doing some stuff out of this particular battery. So for my last of the test flights, I decided to see if we can get some range on this. So I've whacked the VTX back up to 350 milliwatts, and I know I've got a good straight shot here where I can get over 1200 meters of range before I hit a road. Now there was some wind going on, and at my point of view it was it felt like a side wind. So you see me leaning over here trying to get the quad in the right position. To stay straight, I'm literally having to lean it over. As I said, this is much more susceptible to wind than a normal quad. Even a sort of a regular toothpick, which would be much more powerful, or anything 3-inch or 5-inch would have absolutely no problems cutting through. Now what I realised as I was going out here is I was thinking, oh, I'm making really good time here, aren't I? In order to get 1 kilometre in a minute, you're obviously doing about 60 kilometres an hour. Now this thing is no slouch, but that seemed a bit quick to me, so I became slightly concerned at this point that I actually might be picking up a bit of a tailwind. Of course, the wind a bit further away from you can feel completely different than where you're standing, but I also figured this is right at the start of my battery. I don't think I'll have problem getting it back, and I'm sticking to sort of a known route, so if I really have to put it down, hopefully I will figure out where it is. So here we are, we're getting just towards that road. That road's about 1,200 and something meters away. The signal's holding up quite well. We're still on our LQ of 2, it's just dropped down to 1 there, which is still fine, and the RSSI is good. I don't know what's up with the regular RSSI. I think I might stop using that, because just having the LQ and having that, the type of hertz you have with the signal strength is much better. So you can see here I've turned around and everything that I thought might be happening has come true. The wind is pushing much more towards me, and we seem to be over at much more of an angle, and you can see that that throttle percentage is up quite a bit more. So it's something to take into account, that yeah, this thing will fly for a decent amount of time, and in this type of setup with the Crossfire you will get a good decent range out of it. But always be aware that this is much more susceptible to wind than anything else. But aside from that, everything is looking really nice. We're making progress. I'm confident in making it back here. I just wish I didn't have to hit the throttle quite so hard. But yeah, the VTX is nice. The camera's good quality. As I said, we're getting those vibrations and sort of wobbles in the wind, but that's just, it's a lightweight quad. That's what you've got. We're not looking for HD footage here. We're looking for our little super stealth micro quad, and that's exactly what we've got. And it is good fun to fly. Again, it's quite, as I said, it gets the heart pumping a bit when you're out such a distance on something so tiny. It really is a different sort of thing to fly. You know, you haven't got a GPS rescue, you haven't got any return to home or anything like that. It's just a bit of raw flying, and trying to get something very micro in a decent distance is, I think, interesting and challenging. Certainly the way you have to fly is really quite different in order to get the best out of the battery. But yeah, we're getting there. That round circle, by the way, used to be a Roman temple, so the farmer doesn't basically plough it, because there's still teams of archaeologists that visit it and dig up bits and pieces, which is quite interesting of the site. But yeah, we're back. It took me about a minute to get out there and another 3 minutes to get back, but that's the way it goes. Yeah, did its mission. After that point, I just really had some fun flying it around. Aside from the fact it feels like a stealth quad, of course, it also feels like something you can kind of take anywhere and no one's going to care about, and yet, you know, you've got some decent range, albeit with some restrictions. But yeah, I had an absolute blast with it. I would say though that higher throttle I had to put in getting the quad back from the its distance did take an effect on the battery. So instead of sort of 10.5 minutes, we're dipping into quite low 3.1 territory at about 9.5 minutes. So I brought this down at that point. Well, I found flying this thing fun and different. I liked the fact I had to concentrate in a completely different way. But I think we have to acknowledge this is definitely not for everybody, and it's got a lot of drawbacks that you would get over a regular quad. I mean, you can't just literally blip it and expect it to get out of trouble. It needs to be flown in a certain way. But that's kind of the appeal for me. It sort of lives up to its name as the Recon, because it's like you're doing a recon mission. You're taking this tiny little thing, you're flying it, you're exploring an area and hopefully coming back again. So it doesn't fly particularly well compared to a regular quad. There are also a few design decisions that I was like, well, why have they done it that way? For example, when we're taking anything long range, I always think it'd be really nice to have a GPS. Now this is tiny and you might struggle where to put one, but I figure you could have one like sitting on top of the battery. But of course we'd already used up all the UARTs. UART number 1 was used for a Wi-Fi adapter so you could connect to it via SpeedyB. It's a nice feature, but it's all but useless, because the amount of times I want to change things over and over again in the field are very, very limited. It's just generally a setup. You might need to do a few tweaks here and there, and that's it. It's set up and you don't have to do it anymore. That UART could have been used for something else. I mean, as it was, we already had to use a soft serial device just to change VTX channels. But then again, what I'm describing with a GPS and also a better buzzer with a lost model thing is stuff like the Recon 4 and the Recon 5, which fly for even longer, and they've got the, you know, facility for doing rescue mode and things like that. So I guess the real unique aspect of this is you can fly off a regular consumer 18650. I say that, make sure your C rating's up high enough, and I found that this little 2600 did I think pound for pound a better job than this one they recommended, which was the 3000. The difference being this was a 15 amp rated, this was a 25 amp rated, so the amp rating's what it's all about. I also like the fact that I could go off and completely be on non-lipos. Using these, my radio uses 18650s as well. I use this in my goggles to power them, which uses 18500s. I can run it all off this USB charger. If I want to, I can plug it into a power bank and all will be good. That's convenience for me, especially when I'm travelling around with the family and I don't want to bring all my bits and pieces. Charging and battery and holding battery seems to be the worst bit. So I think it's got that going for it. So I guess it's fun, but it's almost that they created it because they could, rather than fulfilling a very specific need. I mean, yeah, if you want to go the smallest you possibly can and fly on 18650, this is it. But did it need to happen, or could you have continued with the 4-inch version and been about the same? I don't know, but it's fun for me. I have to acknowledge though it's not for everybody. But I have to say thanks once again to Gaff at Your FPV, and don't forget to check out his shop, links down below if you're in the UK. I know I'll be doing more with this because I'll be able to take this with me anywhere, so look out for some more on it. But in the meantime, this has been the little Recon Free Nano long range 18650 type quad. Hope that was useful. I'll catch you next one. Bye for now. Well, you've made it to the end of the video, so thanks once again for watching. If you like what you saw, then please consider subscribing, and if you really like what you saw, then be sure to check out the link to my blog for a variety of ways in which you can help support this channel.